What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through the #1 ESPN fantasy football draft strategy. So every platform is going to be a little bit different in terms of where the value is, player by player, also where certain positions are getting pushed up. So in this specific video, we're going to be locking in on ESPN fantasy football, helping you guys dominate your ESPN fantasy football drafts. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Going to be talking about some of my favorite targets at every position, and then also just some general draft strategy for ESPN fantasy football as a whole, and then also just some interesting strategy points at each specific position. But we're going to start off with the running backs, and I think that when we're looking at how these running backs are being valued, when I'm looking at the first 6 running backs off the board, I think the majority of these guys are pretty fairly priced. I think after the top 6 is when the value for running backs starts to become pretty steep, and I think that is where the value shifts over to the wide receiver position. So you can see here, these are the top 17 running backs in terms of ESPN ADP. And you can see here on the left, we have the top 6, Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs. And green circle means I think they're solid values at their current price. Yellow means, like I'm all right with it. Red means I do not like them at their price. So you can see here, CMC around, pick 1. He's my 101. Love the value there. Breece Hall, pick 5, pick 6. Definitely think that's a fair price. Bijan Robinson in the pick 7 area. I like that. Saquon's the only one out of these top 6 that I don't love. I would just take Jonathan Taylor over him. I would take Jahmyr Gibbs over him. So I would not take him, 12, 13 area. Jonathan Taylor's going early second. If he's fallen into the second round, I think he's a nice pick. And then Jahmyr Gibbs all the way down at pick 16 area. For me, that is an insane price tag. I'm definitely all in on him there. So I do think the top 6 running backs are, pretty solidly priced. I think we start to see these running backs really get pushed up draft boards from running back 7 through 17. So these are the rest of the running backs going within the first 4 rounds. And you can see I only really like the value on 2 of these dudes. It is Travis Etienne and Devon Achane. Kyron, I'm fine with him as a mid-second round pick, but I definitely don't think you're getting a steal. And then the rest of these running backs, I just do not like at cost. So Derrick Henry, mid-second, not a huge fan of that. Isaiah Pacheco, also kind of mid to late second, don't love that. James Cook, Joe Mixon getting pushed into the late 3rd round, definitely not taking them in the 3rd. Kamara, almost sneaking into the 3rd round, no thank you. Same thing with Rachaad White and getting pushed up there. Josh Jacobs, also early 4th round, just not a huge fan of those price tags. And then also do not like Kenneth Walker as a 4-5 turn pick. And on most ESPN leagues, the roster setup, your starting lineup, is going to be 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and then kicker, defense, your bench slots. So you're not really in a position where you can just completely punt the running back position. With that type of roster setup where you can only start 3 wide receivers, you really can't go into a draft looking at a 0 RB look. And I just don't think the value is there at running back once you're getting into the late 3rd round, into the 4th, into the 5th. When we get into the wide receiver position, I think you guys are going to love the value that's going to be available in those rounds. And so I'm in a spot where I really want to lock down at least one of these top running backs within the first 3 rounds. So if I can get CMC, Breece, Bijan, JT, Gibbs, ETN, or Achane at their current ADP, I would really like to do that. I don't want to get into a spot where I've punted the running back for the first 3 rounds, and then round 4 and round 5, I'm in a position where I have to force a running back draft pick. I really want to lock down at least one running back within those first 3 rounds, start a hero RB build, double hero RB build, and whether you're picking anywhere from 1 through 12, you're likely going to have the opportunity to draft at least one of these dudes at around their ADP. So I would definitely consider that. I want to be leaving the first few rounds with at least one of these stud running backs. Now, like I mentioned, don't love the value on running back late 3rd, 4th, 5th, but I think the running back value starts to come back around once we hit the 6th round. You can see there's kind of a pretty significant gap from the running back 17, Kenneth Walker, to the running back 18 and Aaron Jones. Kenneth Walker is going right on the 4-5 turn area. The next running back is going early 6th round. And I think 6th round Aaron Jones, 6th round Ramondre Stevenson, I think those are very fair prices to pay to snag your running back 2, maybe your running back 3. I mean, then we're getting into 7th round David Montgomery, 7th round Zamir White, 7th round James Conner. These are guys where on other platforms, I know Yahoo specifically, these guys are going to get pushed way up draft boards, and typically these are not the types of running backs I'm looking to draft, but I think 7th round is a very fair price to pay for Montgomery, Zamir White, James Conner. Then we're getting into, round 8, Jonathan Brooks, round 8, Jalen Warren. Like, I think those are very reasonable prices for these guys. Even Brian Robinson, going in that range. Najee Harris, Raheem Mostert is not within the first 100 picks of ADP. So I think once you can avoid like that round 4 or 5 area at the running back position, then you're definitely opened up to, getting back to drafting running backs round 6, round 7, round 8. I think a lot of those dudes could end up paying off. So I kind of just wanted to run through some of my favorite running back targets at this point. I already kind of mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane. Jahmyr Gibbs is going around pick 16. He's being drafted as the running back 6. I believe I have him ranked as my number 9 overall player. So on a platform where running backs are pushed up, if I'm getting a guy at pretty much like a 7-pick discount from where I value them, I'm definitely taking that. Devon Achane, with how pushed up running back values are, I think it's wild that you can get a young running back on one of the best offenses in the NFL, a dude who was just the running back 5 in points per game as a rookie. You're able to get that dude back into the 3rd round outside the top 12 running backs. In my opinion, that's insane. He's being drafted as the running back 13. I view Achane as my running back 6, so I love the value there. I'd be willing to take him easily in the 2nd round. Jonathan Brooks, he's my running back 18, going off the board as the running back 24. I love the value there. Raheem Mostert, I mentioned. Raheem Mostert is honestly someone who I think would kind of get pushed up in ESPN draft board. That has not been the case. He was the running back 4 in points per game last year. I know age is a concern. He's getting up there, but he's my running back 24, being drafted as the running back 30. And then Devin Singletary, another one of these guys where maybe you don't go super heavy at the running back position. You need some depth, someone who could slide in as a potential starter. Devin Singletary lined up to be the clear running back 1 for the Giants. I have him as my running back 32. He's being drafted as the running back 36. And then I also wanted to talk about some of my later round running back targets. So these are just when you're throwing your darts, guys being drafted outside the top 36. You have Blake Corum at running back 37, could be the most valuable handcuff in fantasy. Trey Benson, running back 38, someone who could be able to work his way into a committee with James Conner while also having that handcuff upside. Gus Edwards looks like the favorite to lead this Chargers backfield. I know J.K. Dobbins is getting some, steam from the media here. I just have a tough time betting on a running back who has torn his ACL and then is coming off a torn Achilles. It's just not a bet that has paid off at all. So Gus Edwards, running back 39, could lead this Chargers backfield. Zach Charbonnet, one of my favorite targets here for later round running backs. I think he can work his way into a committee, also has handcuff upside. Chase Brown, there's just a lot of uncertainty with whether him or Zach Moss is going to lead this backfield. So potential running back 1 for the Bengals at running back 43. I'm in on that all day. Marshawn Lloyd, running back 47. I think he's going to play a much larger role in this Packers backfield than people are expecting. Rico Dowdle, one of the few veterans here with these late round targets, but someone who could just straight up lead this Cowboys backfield. I can't imagine people should be extra sold on Zeke. Like, maybe he has the familiarity, he has the continuity within that offense, but so does Rico Dowdle. So potential Cowboys running back 1, you're getting him as a running back 5. And then 2 more rookies, Jalen Wright, Ray Davis, just guys who I think can find their way, into their current offenses. So that's the running back position. Now let's shift over to the wide receivers. And I think the top 8 wide receivers, I feel like they're all pretty fairly priced. Like I mentioned earlier, I do kind of want to look towards those running backs in those early rounds. So maybe that means you are picking a Jahmyr Gibbs, a Jonathan Taylor, over a guy like a Puka Nacua. But where they're being drafted, I don't think anything's crazy. I think where we start to see the value is from wide receiver 9 through honestly, pretty much all the rest of the wide receivers. They're just super pushed back in terms of their ADP. And I wanted to compare where these wide receivers were being drafted on ESPN compared to where they're being drafted on Underdog. So Underdog, if you guys aren't familiar, pretty sharp ADP. All the drafts are paid, so people are actually invested. They're not just joining mock drafts, messing around. And it does make sense for the wide receivers to be pushed up a little bit because the roster setup is starting 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs. So it makes sense that it favors wide receivers a little bit. but the difference is absolutely extreme. You can see here, the wide receiver 27 on ESPN is being drafted pick 74. What's that? That is into the 7th round of fantasy football drafts. You can see the wide receiver 27 on Underdog is an early 4th round pick. That difference is just extreme in terms of where these wide receivers are going. And so while I will talk about some of my favorite wide receiver targets, I think you really cannot go wrong with most of these wide receiver picks. Like the wide receiver 9, Davante Adams. I don't have Davante Adams as my wide receiver 9, but I would be completely fine with drafting him at the back end of the 2nd round, which is where he's currently going. So I think you really cannot go wrong. You just pick your favorite options at the wide receiver position. If you're drafting them near their ADP, I think they're going to end up paying off for you. Now, looking specifically at some of my favorite wide receiver targets, I mentioned how I think the top 8 are pretty fairly priced, but I do really like Garrett Wilson. He's being drafted outside the 1st round, around pick like 13, pick 14. He's ranked as the wide receiver 8, my wide receiver 7, so there's not a massive difference, but I do think the upside Garrett Wilson has this season in an Aaron Rodgers-led offense, I think letting him slip into the 2nd round is probably going to be a mistake. Like if you can start off your draft at like the 1-2 turn and you can get like Jahmyr Gibbs and a Garrett Wilson, I think that is a very, very solid start to your draft. And I am considering moving him up, maybe even to wide receiver 6. That tier of him, Puka, and A.J. Brown is just so close to me, so there's definitely a little bit of wiggle room there. Like he could pretty much be ranked anywhere from wide receiver 6 to wide receiver 8, but I do think getting him in the 2nd is a pretty solid value. Marvin Harrison Jr. is my wide receiver 9. After that top 8, you have a pretty large tier. There's not a lot of consensus. I have Marvin Harrison Jr. leading that tier. We've seen these rookie wide receivers come in, have success. He has a solid landing spot here. Getting him in the 3rd round, I think, is a very, palatable price to pay for a rookie wide receiver. I know on some platforms like Underdog, he's going 1-2 turn. I think it's going to be tough for a lot of people to swallow that price tag, but I think getting him in the 3rd round seems very fair. Drake London going 3-4 turn, in my opinion, is wild. I have him right behind Marvin Harrison Jr. as my wide receiver 10. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 15. When we're looking at upside with this tier of wide receiver, Drake London has the combination of being a proven, talented player while also having a pretty solid offensive situation around him and limited target competition. Outside of Drake London, this is not a super strong wide receiver room. You have Kirk Cousins coming in. Drake London's fantasy production hasn't been great, but he's been in pretty awful passing attacks, so I really like Drake London. I also really like Nico Collins. He's my wide receiver 12, being drafted as the wide receiver 16, the likely wide receiver 1 on a very good passing attack. Debo is being drafted as the wide receiver 19. I have him as my wide receiver 13. It truly seems crazy to have Debo Samuel going like late 4th round, early 5th round. The value is just wild. Jalen Waddle going early 5th round. He's my wide receiver 15, being drafted as the wide receiver 20. DJ Moore, my wide receiver 16, being drafted as the wide receiver 21. Then we also have Malik Neighbors being drafted as the wide receiver 25. He's my wide receiver 19. I don't even think wide receiver 25 is crazy. Like, I get the concerns. He's a rookie, not on a great offense, but he was such a great prospect. I think he can kind of overcome this situation, and getting him in round 6, that type of prospect, I would be in on that all day. Tank Dell going around pick 71. He's my wide receiver 18. I think people are burying him for Stephon Diggs. I don't think that's something we should be doing here. T. Higgins, wide receiver 27. He's my wide receiver 26. But just being able to get a guy like T. Higgins in the 7th round just screams value. This is a guy where when him and Burrow are both healthy, he has the ability to be a top 12 fantasy wide receiver in points per game. Getting that late, you just have to capitalize. And then Deontay Johnson, Hollywood Brown, both being drafted outside the top 100 picks. Deontay Johnson going to be the clear wide receiver 1 for the Panthers. He's been a fantasy wide receiver 1 in a previous season. Getting him at pick 103, 104 is wild. And then Hollywood Brown, the potential wide receiver 1 for a Chiefs offense, is being drafted as a wide receiver 40. So these are some of my favorite values at the wide receiver position. But like I mentioned, there's going to be value with pretty much any of these guys just based on where they're slotted in drafts. And then I also wanted to talk about some of my favorite rookie targets. I think on some of these more casual platforms, ESPN, Yahoo, a real edge you're going to be able to get over your fantasy football league mates is by going after these rookies. They're unproven. People don't want to spend top picks on them because they haven't actually delivered it on the field. But buying into that uncertainty is really something that can kind of set you apart from your league mates. So in my opinion, all 5 of these rookie wide receivers are great values. I already talked about, guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, but Xavier Worthy, Rome Odunze, Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., I think they're all in interesting situations this season. Xavier Worthy on this Chiefs offense, crazy upside. Rome Odunze, I don't think it's crazy to think he could work his way into 2 wide receiver sets. I think this Bears offense is going to look very good from week 1. Keon Coleman, potential number 1 target for Josh Allen. Ladd McConkey, likely going to be the wide receiver 1 for the Chargers. And I think Brian Thomas Jr. is a really good fit with Trevor Lawrence here. And all of these rookies right now on ESPN are being drafted in round 10 or later. Getting these guys in round 10, round 11, I think you just clean up with them at their current price tag. So Xavier Worthy, Rome Odunze, Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., all guys who I love at their current ADP. Now shifting over to the quarterback position, just going to run through some of my favorite targets here. I do think some of the top guys, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, I'm not saying I'm completely out on them, but I would need them to slip a little bit from their current ADP to actually be interested in drafting them. These are the guys who I just think are really nice values. Anthony Richardson, he's going off the board as the quarterback 6. He is my quarterback 5. But if you can draft him early 5th round, I think compared to where some of those other high-end QB1s are being drafted, getting him in the 5th is a nice value. And I think he has the ceiling to compete with some of those other guys. Kyler Murray at pick 88 to me is wild. He is my quarterback 5. I have him ranked ahead of CJ Stroud. He has good weapons. Marvin Harrison Jr. is coming in. Trey McBride. He's really just been a very consistent quarterback 1. He has some rushing upside. I think we could definitely see more of that this year, a full season removed from the torn ACL. But him being ranked as the quarterback 9, in my opinion, is way too low for Kyler Murray. Then if you're in a spot where you kind of punted the early options, you didn't get an elite quarterback 1, I like the price tags on both Jayden Daniels and Caleb Williams. Jayden Daniels, he's being drafted as the quarterback 12. I have him as the quarterback 12. But I think if you're getting him like round 10, round 11, the value's there. Caleb Williams in round 11, he's my quarterback 11, being drafted as the quarterback 14. A guy who has dual threat upside, has great weapons, heading into a fantastic year 1 situation. Really like Caleb Williams as a potential quarterback option if you do punt the early round guys. Then Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, I have him as the quarterback 14, quarterback 15. They're being drafted as the quarterback 16, quarterback 19. So 2 guys who I also like if you punt the position. Maybe you snag a Jayden Daniels, a Caleb Williams to be your quarterback 1, and then you get a proven option like a Justin Herbert or a Trevor Lawrence as your quarterback 2. And then now we're going to shift over into the tight end position. And this is something that I've talked about a lot. You have this tier of these top tight ends where you have Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, Trey McBride. In my opinion, all 4 of those guys should be drafted very, very close together. When we look at their production last year, for Sam Laporta over the whole season, Travis Kelce over the whole season, they were very close together in points per game. For Mark Andrews, if you remove his final game where he left with injury, he would have been right in the mix with those guys. And then Trey McBride, if you only take the games over the second half of the season where he was the starting tight end, when he took over as the starter, he actually would have been the tight end 1 in PPR points per game. So I think all these guys should be drafted very close together. But what we're seeing on pretty much every single platform is Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, they're going late round 2, early round 3, and then you're seeing guys like Mark Andrews fall to the mid 4th round. Trey McBride on ESPN is going in the 5th round. There is no shot I'm spending a late 2nd, 3rd round pick on a Travis Kelce, a Sam Laporta. If I can get Mark Andrews mid 4th round, Trey McBride like early 5th round, I will take Andrews and McBride at their cost, over Laporta and Kelce every single time. So I really like the value on Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, especially if you're not getting one of those like top tier quarterbacks. You're not getting a Josh Allen, a Jalen Hurts, a Lamar, a Patrick Mahomes. I do like the idea of getting a high upside tight end, and I think Mark Andrews and Trey McBride definitely fit that. I also think the tight ends that are going after them, Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, I think both of these guys are also very solid options. Dalton Kincaid, getting him in round 6, didn't have the most insane rookie season, but the opportunity is 100% there for a massive year 2 in this Josh Allen-led offense. He's my tight end 5, being drafted as the tight end 6. Then you have Kyle Pitts, who is being drafted in the 7th round. He is my tight end 6, being drafted as the tight end 8. I know people aren't super high on Kyle Pitts. He's kind of let you down for 3 straight seasons. He is still very young. He is in by far the best offensive situation of his career. You have Kirk Cousins coming in. He has not had quarterback play even close to that. So I like all 4 of these tight ends. You can see I kind of have them ranked in succession here. So Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid, and then Kyle Pitts. So that's going to wrap it up for some of my favorite targets at the main positions: running back, wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end. But then I also just wanted to give you guys my general thoughts on the defense and kicker positions. I know some people, they really like to go out there. They, feel like they're getting a positional edge by reaching for either the top defense or the guy that I think is going to be the top kicker. My advice to you guys would be, I would just wait until the last 2 rounds to draft defense and kicker. If I was giving you my real advice, I would say that I'd prefer to not play in a league that had kicker and defense, but that might be a hot take. I think some people like it. They like the uncertainty, the variance, but I would still stick to just taking those guys with your last 2 picks. You should not be, reaching round 12, round 13, passing up on solid positional players to draft the first defense, especially if you're in like a 10, 12 team league. Every single week, there are going to be solid defensive streaming options. And then for kicker, you're just really not able to get enough of a positional advantage to actually warrant like reaching up a few rounds to draft one. If you look back to last season, the difference from the number 2 kicker in points per game to the number 18 kicker in points per game was 2 fantasy points per game. There's just not an extreme difference between these guys. There's no reason to be reaching up multiple rounds to get what you think is the best kicker. And even looking back at last year, I think the number 1 kicker was the dude from the Dallas Cowboys, and I don't believe he was some like highly drafted kicker. I'm pretty sure he was a rookie last season. So you're not even like guaranteeing that 1 to 2 point per game edge, because you just never know how these kickers are actually going to be finishing up fantasy-wise. So I would not reach on defense. I would not reach at the kicker position. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. Hopefully this video helps you guys go out, dominate your ESPN fantasy football leagues. Let me know your thoughts on the video. If you are drafting on ESPN, let me know what your roster looks like. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you all in the next one.